Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, a Pittsburgh Steelers podcast made by fans like you, for fans like you. Now, here's your host, Joe Kuzma.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. I am your host, Joe Kuzma, and hey, folks, trying to get some of these shows out to you as we try to make hay here on some other projects at Steel City Underground. Got some really great stuff coming your way. One of those is already in progress. We started this little concept called The Steelers Who Marched Us to Madness, and for those of you who have been longtime listeners here, you'll know who some of those names are without even seeing all of the brackets filled out. But if you head on over to the website, we are posting profiles of each of these players, one individual per day, 2-day voting period. It's set up like the whole March Madness thing. I mean, hey, we had to jump on this, right? That's what's going on. It's tournaments, it's brackets, it's bracket busting. So we're going to see. Our first matchup was kick returners with Dree Archer and Jacoby Jones. And man, was that a tight race if there ever was one. I'll give you some of those results when we get all of them in. We just released part one of the running backs with Ben Tate and then LeGarrette Blount following up with that. And then we're going to have a whole other set of 4 more names. These are our players. And now I don't mean this to be salty towards any of these individuals in particular, except for LeGarrette Blount, because you know what, I don't really care. He walked out on the team. I think in the best of interest that Dree Archer tried his best, or Jacoby Jones was brought in with the best of interest, and even Ben Tate himself. But more or less, it was the fan expectation behind some of these players, or how their tenure with the Steelers didn't exactly pan out as many of us had anticipated. So the irony here being, the Steelers have finally made some moves in free agency. I mean, what? It took them two and a half weeks to get off their butt, and they had the money to spend. In fact, they still have some money to spend, a little over $19 million, which is better than what half of the teams in the league that already went on spending sprees have. But 3 players in 2 days earlier this week, and I was waiting to see if there were any other moves and blah, blah, blah. You know, the news is light this time of the year. Sometimes we make up things that we have to talk about, and I really appreciate everyone that supports and still listens and tunes in. Some people have tuned out. They're in baseball mode now, and I don't know. I don't get that personally. No offense to my friends over at North Shore 9 who cover that nonstop, but I guess I cover football nonstop too. So, and of course, I've been paying attention to hockey and to a much lesser extent the NBA. I mean, the NBA season doesn't start until the playoffs. How about their commissioner talking about players sitting out and stuff like that? Sounds a lot like Roger Goodell, right? But anyway, the Steelers, and I wish I wasn't flying solo today because I'd love to hear Brian on the show next to me trying to say, last week we went over this whole deal with what? We had one signing and a couple re-signings. There was Leandro Jones, there was David Johnson, Justin Hunter came on board as a wide receiver. We, discussed how that would affect the draft. The Steelers might still take a wide receiver. I mean, it ultimately comes down to there's still been no word, at least as I'm recording this right now, and within the next few hours as this post becomes live on the interwebs, I don't think there's going to be any news, but it would really behoove the NFL to let the Pittsburgh Steelers know what's going on with Martavis Bryant already. I mean, come on. This has been forever. The guy is, put in his reinstatement. What are they thinking about? I mean, just let him, like, if he's going to screw up, he's going to screw up. If he's going to shoot himself in the foot, let him do it on his own. Just to reinstate the guy. I mean, this isn't Alden Smith, for example, with the Oakland Raiders. I mean, that guy shoots himself in the foot like twice a week, maybe. A whole different story. But on just talking about expectations of these players, Justin Hunter, a big, fast target. He was, a guy that came out of the college ranks and into the draft with a lot of potential and a lot of hype, and maybe hasn't lived up to that billing. And the Steelers are kind of filling out some of the holes or gaps, or doing the type of insurance thing that myself and Brian and Ron have talked about here on the show. They're using free agency to set up the draft. I love that word. I love when we were talking with Ron and Rob Rossi about this and saying this is exactly what the Steelers do. They do this every year. They're always looking. We were talking about maybe using Darrelle Revis as an example with this, but instead they went out and they got Cody Sensabaugh. And I don't have a problem with Cody Sensabaugh whatsoever. I was trying to figure out exactly what happened with this guy because he had 4 solid years in Tennessee. He ended up leaving there for last offseason for a decent contract with the LA Rams. It was 3 years, $15 million, and he turned himself from being a 4th-round pick and just kind of a guy. He could play in the nickel, and he could also play in the outside too, so he's versatile. This is what the Steelers coaching staff likes in their players. So they can move him around like a chess piece, just like we've been saying, and I'm thinking this is going to happen with the draft too, whoever they get. And so Sensabaugh in 2014, finally starts 6 games. Then he starts 15 of them in 2015 for the Titans, signs his contract, ends up with like 2-3 games with the Rams, gets released, and picked up off waivers by the New York Giants. I was wondering, the Giants had a really bad pass defense like 2 years ago. They were one of 2 teams worse than the Steelers, if you remember the Steelers being 30th, and I think the Giants were 31st, so they only had 1 team worse than them, and that was the Saints, who are still trying to fix things down there in the Big Easy. But the New York Giants themselves, they pick up Cody Sensabaugh, and he plays 10 games last season, and I don't know, maybe they might have wanted him back, but instead they ended up with Antoine Blake, which was like, there's a WTF if you ever heard one. Should do a whole episode on that. So the guy for the last 2 years has been like giving up like the most yards attributed to any individual cornerback for any corner in the NFL. So you have Sensabaugh here, who comes after playing 10 games with the Giants. He had a major impact in his debut, as put out by one of the Steelers' PR personnel. I think it was Ryan Scarpino, who had mentioned, like, I think he had like a forced fumble and like however many pass deflections, blah, 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 blah. So he made an impact with the Giants. It's going to be interesting to see what kind of player. 2 interceptions in 2015, going back 2 seasons, 42 tackles, solo tackles, and 8 pass deflections. So he also had one of those interceptions taken back for a touchdown. So it'll be interesting to see what Cody Sensabaugh brings to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What I think he brings is, I think there's some writing on the wall. I think Justin Hunter's signing and I think Sensabaugh's signing really might spell the end for players such as Darius Hayward-Bay or William Gay. A lot of us feel William Gay might be on the decline. You may have 3 players that are really vying for that corner slot or nickel corner position that we were talking about the Steelers possibly targeting in the draft, which they still could, but now you have a little more of security there maybe. Now it still depends on Ross Cockrell, who was tendered very low with a 4th-round pick. I don't know if any teams are going after Ross. Really, it's been quiet on the Western Front when it comes to Ross Cockrell and any activity. I don't know that he's visited with anyone. No one's been reporting on it, so I don't know what's going on with it either. The players certainly don't tell us. They're mum's the word right now. In some cases, they can't say anything or they won't say anything, depending on the type of deals and whatnot that they're seeking. So Ross is a restricted free agent in the Steelers. He has till a certain date that I don't have in front of me because it really wasn't the topic of discussion today, but since I'm on it, he has till a certain date to sign this tender and come back, and he'll be there for 1 more year. But this Sensabaugh deal is for 2 years, which is looking a little bit beyond if Cockrell were to leave. I mean, let's just face it, starting corners in this league, we've seen what Bryce McCain fetched with only 1 year here in Pittsburgh. So he went down to Miami and got a boatload of money. And we've seen what Keenan Lewis has fetched. And we also saw what the Steelers paid Cortez Allen, even though that one didn't work out. This is kind of like quarterbacks. These aren't guys that you just like let go because there's certain positions in this league. They're not really dime a dozen. I mean, corners are hard to find. Boundary corners, difficult players. They end up costing you a pretty penny. Quarterbacks, the passers and not quarter. These guys, they are, they're making a mint. They're definitely at the highest premium. Pass rushers as well, left tackles, your blindside protectors, and some linemen. So it depends. There's all values and things, and you could say what you want about that. But I think the Sensabaugh signing here was a sensible signing in the fact that now you don't know what Senquez Golson is going to bring to you. He has been hurt in 2 training camps. He hasn't even been on the field for a preseason game. We have not seen this guy play football in 2 years. He's a second-round pick. He definitely has what Mike Tomlin would probably call a pedigree. And we expect certain things, but nothing is a given. Nothing's a guarantee. Nothing was a guarantee if this was we just drafted him this year and putting him on the field. There's no guarantee he would be any good either. So the Sensabaugh signing, along with Will Gay maybe being a little long in the tooth. Look, I've had a love-hate with Will Gay. This kind of reminds me of the whole Landry Jones thing where I was defending Landry Jones as far as being a backup and coming around, and he still does some boneheaded things here or there. Will Gay's first stint with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm sorry, I just thought it was miserable. It was awful. And it's probably the same thing we thought about Ike Taylor at one point. And these are guys that become beloved players in the city and with the team, and sometimes it's even in spite of what they do on the field. They're just good people, okay? And they end up being decent, above average, maybe good or great players. I'm not going to say one thing or the other about any of them, but I remember Ike Taylor struggled a lot in his early years, and I remember William Gay struggling quite a bit, and he went over to the Cardinals, came back, and he had actually been good. I thought he was pretty solid. I was a big supporter of the Steelers signing him to a 3-year deal, but last year was kind of up and down, and I don't know, some of that could be working with rookies like Sean Davis and Artie Burns, and going from the outside to the inside of flip-flopping and everything else. So seeing a lot of that with safety talk in the draft too, and a lot of people are forgetting, and I really want this to be like its own topic, and I think it will. Sean Davis was an excellent player when he finally got to play safety last year. But he started the year as a nickel corner because Will Gay had to play on the outside. So there was a lot of shifting around, and we saw the defense was pretty miserable those first maybe 6, 7, 8. I'm not going to say 8 games. I think, they win? They ended up winning like 9 in a row. But I'm going to say at least from like that Dallas Cowboys game on, even though they couldn't stop anything. I mean, who could stop anybody in that game? What was there, 7, 8 lead changes? So, I mean, Sean Davis gets in there as a starter, and the Steelers really don't lose until the AFC Championship. And even in that game, I was telling my colleagues here at Steel City Underground, I think one of those scores from New England was Sean Davis had to leave the field. What was it? Injury, mandatory thing. Hey, you got to leave the field. Lost his helmet, something of that nature, and you're required to leave the field for a play. And New England, sharks smelling blood in the water, they strike at that immediately. It just shows you how important Sean Davis is to this defense. So you can't pull Sean Davis from that safety spot and put him back in a nickel if something were to happen to Senquez Golson again, or something happened to Will Gay, or something happened to both of them. So Cody Sensabaugh, I'm very happy about that signing. We didn't see Justin Gilbert really fill any type of role like that last year. Very low risk on taking a flyer on him. And these are guys, I need to remind everyone here too, the Steelers have the luxury of consistency. When you have a coach who's been here for 10 years, like Mike Tomlin, entering his 11th season now, and you have offensive coordinator Todd Haley's been 4, 5, 6 seasons now. Was it 2012? I think it was his first season when he came into Pittsburgh. And Keith Butler has been around for a very long time. He used to be a linebacker coach, one of the positions manned by Joey Porter now. And Jerry Osowski, of course, covering the inside linebackers. So Butler's been here since Dick LeBeau was here. He's been ingrained in this system. Other teams kept trying to poach him to be a defensive coordinator elsewhere. These are the reason this is important. The coaching staff has been through this offseason process multiple times and together as well, and same with their scouts and scouting department. So when there's a player like a Cody Sensabaugh or a Tyson Alu who's also signed, or even Niall Davis. Oh, geez, I'm going to keep saying Niles Davis. There's a nearby community called Niles, so it's just stuck in my brain, and it's kind of hard. It's not quite Yinzer speak, but it's close. So these players are guys that when they came out of college, this same Steelers staff was around and evaluating, and they had certain grades on them, and they felt maybe this is a player that was on their draft board and just didn't work out for whatever reason. And this has happened with other players, and most certainly, I'm going to say this as well. Mike Tomlin, it's like if you play against the Steelers and Mike Tomlin sees you from across the field, it's almost like it's an audition for the Steelers if that team should give you up. I mean, the Steelers played the Bills last year with Justin Hunter. Now, I'm trying to remember for certain if Niall Davis had gotten in the game. In fact, I'm going to look this up here in a moment. If Niall Davis was actually around when the Steelers played the Chiefs, but the Steelers have played the Chiefs umpteen times over the last few seasons. Now, he wasn't in the playoff game because he had already been traded or sent over to the Green Bay Packers, and he had a short stint there as well. But we've seen this happen. It's like Alejandro Villanueva. Like I said, Justin Hunter was with the Bills last year. Zach Mettenberger, another great example of a guy who played against the Steelers. So it's kind of an audition almost, if you will, that if you are an opponent of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you could end up, and you played decently against this team. Jordan Todman in the preseason. There's another name. 2 years ago, Carolina Panthers, third or fourth game in the preseason. Steelers always play the Panthers. A short bus trip makes sense to do that, just the same way like a lot of times they'll play Philadelphia too. And this Jordan Todman is the running back there in the preseason, and he just absolutely shreds the Steelers' defense. And guess where Jordan Todman ends up once he's released? He doesn't make the 53-man roster in Carolina. He ends up in Pittsburgh. Not that big of a surprise. So, in fact, Niall Davis, I'm not going to say this is a good audition for him here. But then again, when you lose 43-14 in that game, that Sunday night game, which will be profiled over the weekend, by the way. Take a look for it. That'll be the next review since we're going week by week. Just wow. Niall Davis, one carry, -2 yards, and he was targeted 3 times, caught 2 of them for 14. So maybe not the best audition, but I want to say the year before when the Steelers had to go to Arrowhead and they had to play with Landry Jones, Niall Davis, just a little bit better. Okay, maybe not the best. I'm going to stop with this. But Niall Davis has had his times in Kansas City. He's kind of gotten bypassed by players like Spencer Ware, Charchandrick West, and of course Jamal Charles was there when healthy. So he was always like a backup. Now, I kind of like the Niall Davis signing. I mean, he's a decent player. 6 foot, 227, a guy that could hammer between the tackles if need be. And I'm not necessarily looking at him as a backup, okay? This is where we need to alter our thinking like I did with backups, like with Landry Jones, okay? The spot that Niall Davis is most likely to threaten is that of Fitzgerald Toussaint, the current or who was the third string running back behind Le'Veon Bell. Now, Bell, without a doubt, is the starter. Bell doesn't concede carries too much, period, even when D'Angelo Williams, the supposed 1A, was back there. Now, mind you, D'Angelo Williams, the first 2 weeks of the regular season last year, was on absolute fire. He was an AFC Player of the Week for week 1. I think in week 2 against the Bengals, I think he got like the FedEx Ground Player of the Week or something like that. He was just unbelievable. Now, you still need not just 2 running backs. I think you need 3 running backs with the Steelers because just by history and talking about insurance, okay, protecting yourselves against anything that could happen to your team. Bell has been hurt. Several seasons he's been hurt. He got hurt at the end of 1 year, and they ended up having to play Jordan Todman, who I just mentioned, and Fitzgerald Toussaint in the playoffs against the Bengals and then against the Broncos. And then you see you didn't have D'Angelo Williams either, and you see what happens. Then Bell gets hurt in the AFC Championship. Now, you did have D'Angelo Williams, so that was okay. But D'Angelo Williams hasn't been there all the time either, as I just mentioned. So you have Fitzgerald Toussaint, and that's like the third guy. Now, going back several years before that and talking about LeGarrette Blount being on this roster, he walks out and they're stuck with, they only have Josh Harris, and they didn't adequately prepare because they still had Dree Archer as well. They they didn't prepare, and they had to pick up Ben Tate last second, and that's one of the guys in this Steelers who marched us to madness. Now, in all fairness, Tate was there around for one game, but I mean, geez, he's basically attributed to 2 turnovers against the Baltimore Ravens in that wild card game, the 2014 season. I think it was played like right after New Year's in January of 2015. Yeah, I mean, those are the things you don't want to have happen. So what does Niall Davis bring to the table? What does he bring to the Steelers? Well, he's a kick returner too. And I'm sure everyone saw these little clips. If you're on social media, there's the clips of him returning kickoffs for a touchdown. And let me tell you, Kansas City Chiefs, their special teams for years have just had like these guys that could return kicks. Now it's Tyreek Hill. I'm trying to think of the guy who was, I want to say it was Dante Hall. You know what? That might maybe, but they had a guy that returned like a ton he was returning one every week several years ago. I think it may have even been before Andy Reid was there, but yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know the Chiefs as well as I know the Steelers. I have a general knowledge of it. But Niall Davis, that's who he threatens. He threatens Toussaint, who's not been a strong kick returner. And I still think the kick return game is a greatly diminished one in the NFL. But you need a guy who can protect the football, and you need a guy that's capable of maybe carrying the load if his number's called. And I think this is a veteran player who's been around for several seasons and can certainly do so. Now, Niall Davis, let's take a look at some of he's had 2 starts in his career, but he has appeared in 57 games, 55 of those with the Chiefs and 2 for the Green Bay Packers. Now, the Packers, he carried the ball, five times for 5 yards. I mean, their running game was a dumpster fire last year, and that's because I don't know if it was like Eddie Lacy getting hurt, or they just lost everybody they had. I think they had James Starks, and then he got hurt, and they were playing a wide receiver, Ty Montgomery, as a running back. He even petitioned to have his number changed in the NFL. Mid-season, the NFL said no. So Niall Davis just kind of comes in, and it's almost like that Ben Tate thing. What are you going to do with like a few days of practice, like a cup of coffee with this team? Not a whole lot. So let's give him a chance here and see what he does. You're going to have OTAs and a training camp and a preseason to see if he's any better. I mean, I'm kind of shocked that Darrell Richardson was on and off and then plucked on to somewhere else after having not been in football for a couple years. So the Steelers saw that Richardson, a veteran-type player. I don't know what they saw with Toussaint to keep him over Richardson, but I think there'll be a healthy competition there. It's not to say these are going to be the only 2 guys behind Bell. Don't be afraid yet. Remember, this is setting up for the draft. This is a very running back rich draft as well. I think they could get somebody in the mid to late rounds, and we're going to discuss a lot of this coming up. But and a lot of people like, for example, Pittsburgh's James Conner. He's come up here on the show before. You could have somebody like that that's going to slip a little further. You're not going to get Leonard Fournette. Let's put it that way. Leonard Fournette is looking to be this year's Zeke Elliott or the previous years like Todd Gurley. He's going to be a high pick. He's probably going to be in I don't even know any later than 20 maybe in the first round, but I'm just guesstimating there. He's not going to be around when the Steelers pick, nor I don't know if the Steelers would consider taking a running back that early. I think they have more pressing needs, and those are some other things to talk about. But taking Niall Davis, that makes sure that they don't have to reach for a running back early and often in the NFL draft. The other name that came up here, Tyson Alu. Now, people are going to butcher his name. I feel bad. Tyson, don't worry about it, bro. I got your back. Alu. So if you're hearing it here, that's definitely the way to say it, at least all the different pronunciation keys I saw, because I looked it up because I didn't want to butcher it. But 6'3", 295. He was the 10th overall pick back in the 2010 NFL draft. That happens to be the same year that the Steelers got Marquise Pouncey, but a lot later. So like I said, this was probably someone that they had already scouted. Now, apparently, Alu can play all up and down the line. So he could play every position, and this is the versatility that they're looking for and need. You can never have enough of any position. Now, I was saying running backs. I mean, the Steelers went through wide receivers last year too, so Justin Hunter coming aboard, of course. They were fairly healthy at the corner position with the exception of Senquez Golson. But defense and defensive scheme, I think it's a lot harder to plug and play somebody in the defense versus someone on the offense. So you want to get ahead of this game. And they went through a lot of defensive linemen. Now, Stephon Tuitt, of course, very solid player. I think he's going to be up for a new deal here in the near future. And I do believe we will have Cam Hayward back at full strength, probably in time for maybe training camp. I saw some crazy pictures. He's always posting some crazy stuff over on Instagram. What a fun guy. And he's wearing black and gold, too. Always got Steelers stuff on. I love Cam. Javon Hargrave, a favorite of mine, even last year, a small school product. First starter on the defensive line in over 20 years for the Steelers. And then beyond that, I mean, you had Ricardo Matthews. He's likely the odd guy out now with Alu, who maybe hasn't lived up to his full billing. And then, of course, you got a couple other guys. You got Big Dan McCullers, and one of my favorites too, LT Latarius Walton. I thought Walton played fantastic for what he was called upon last season. But you can never have enough. I mean, they had to get Johnny Maxey off the practice squad in order to fill in too. So if these guys up front, it's always good to keep them fresh. And I think this is finally where you're at. You can have Hargrave in there. You can have Alu in there. You could have Hayward in there. You could have Tuitt in there. I like it because Big Dan he's just somebody you put in the middle of the field just to plug up everything. Alu has 18, not reading right, 88 starts in the NFL, and he has appeared or dressed for 110 games. He has a handful of sacks. Just a reminder here, defensive linemen, not typical that they have a lot of tackles or a lot of sacks. He had 2.5 just last season. He has 17.5 in his career, 177 tackles. So this is another one of those things where Alu could definitely excel here in Pittsburgh's system. And let's just say, hey, finally we could give a blow to these guys that have been playing all of these different snaps, and then they end up getting hurt as a consequence. I mean, Cam Hayward was an Iron Man. Tuitt has been an Iron Man. But how much more do you want to press them? It's like one of these, let's say it's a factory that's just going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. How long until something blows? How long until something breaks? You got that machine running constantly. So definitely Hargrave fits that kind of mold too. But, man, this is going to be a nice guy to put into that rotation as well. So I'm not too I'll tell you what, I was excited about all these because when I saw that the Steelers were definitely they had these guys coming in for visits, and I said, you know what, let's not let them leave the building. And as we know, certain bargains, they had a little bit of money, they had price in mind. As we keep going further, some of these players can't have their agents, or if they are their own agent, dictate price anymore because, hey, it's what we have left in the budget. Do you want to play football this year? Take it or leave it. And that's where the Steelers are smart. I mean, the only other team I see that's really this patient, now I didn't see a whole lot of moves. Green Bay Packers had a few. Of course, they got Devon House. They signed that guy while he's still over at the Southside Complex. But Kansas City Chiefs are real patient and real stingy too. But then again, they had to pay some of their own guys just like the Steelers did. So they had to get a deal done with Eric Berry, and I'm trying to think who the other player was. They had two big deals just like the Steelers had to do with AB and Lev Bell. So, but anyways, folks, it's been nice having you around once again. I do think that this does put some laser focus now on the Steelers going for an edge rusher. You're either a defensive end that's going to convert to outside linebacker or a true outside linebacker, although there aren't as many of them that play in that type of system in college. This is what they're going to be looking for. It's definitely a need. We know what the depth chart looks like. Jarvis Jones is gone. You got Bud Dupree. James Harrison's ageless, but how much longer can he do it? You're talking about that factory going constantly. Arthur Moats, not going to be around forever either, so you got to look for the future there. Whether that future plays immediately in a day one, don't know. Obviously, corner, they're a little bit more solid there, but I think they still want to upgrade that secondary. Corner, safety, maybe. Maybe another linebacker. I don't know. I'm thinking all defense. Never know, though. I said you could go running back. But you see now, hey, you know what? You're not forced to take the 7th best corner that's on the board at this point because your value or your best player available may be at another position. Now you can wait till rounds 2 or 3 where that value now increases versus that first round pick, and you're not reaching because I need a corner. And I'm just using corner figuratively as an example. It could be any position, but now the Steelers have a little bit more flexibility. I think everybody in the world feels that they're going to take an edge rusher with one of their first 2 picks in this draft. I'm one of those people that have that firm belief as well. Folks, until next time, we're going to talk about some of that draft stuff coming up. And like I said, some exciting projects forthcoming. So if you have any questions, 203-900-4SCU. I almost forgot the number, so please don't you forget it either. Until next time, be safe, be good, and I'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.